right, hi, and welcome to episode 8 of Baseball and Apple Pie, Story North. And that's pie, not the kind you eat, but, you know, like the geometry pie. So
clever.
Very clever. Tonight we're going to be talking about baseball narratives. We're going to be talking about some classic essays. We're going to talk about how baseball writing has changed with the advent of the internet. Have blogs and online commentary changed the way we talk about sports? And hopefully we'll also talk a little baseball tonight. I'm Jay Stevens. I'm here with Jeff Kamen. Hey, Jeff.
Hi, Jay.
And
How
Kim,
are you?
Yeah, I'm swell. And Kim Todd. Hey, Kim.
Hi.
And tonight we have a special guest, a host of the Alive and Social podcast, The Breakdown, Brandon Warren. Hey, Brandon, what's up, man?
Hey, good evening, folks. I am doing great. A little bit chilly today, but not too bad.
Yeah, it's been a fabulous fall so far.
Can't complain.
No complaining. Hey, I'm a fan of your show, The Breakdown, with Cole DeVries, right? Is that how you pronounce his last name? Yeah. The former
DeVries.
Yeah, yep. DeVries, former pitcher for the Twins. Tell us a little bit about the show. What do you guys talk about? How'd you describe it? That kind of thing.
It's a little more in-depth than I think the average fan gets from other places in the Twin Cities as far as baseball philosophy and theory. And, we just try to really dive into kind of hard-hitting topics in the game, especially leaning on Cole's experience pitching in the big leagues for parts of 2 seasons. We do have some fun, too. There's some whimsy on either side of the show, the beginning and the end. And then kind of in the middle, we do the nuts and bolts where we might, lean on his experience to talk about maybe the Bryce Harper, John Papelbon situation that happened a couple weeks ago and how players feel that gets policed. And he's got very good insight. He's a very good guy to have on my side. And so we have a lot of fun with it. We usually end up going just a little over an hour on Thursday afternoons. And I think we are 12 or 13 episodes in. So far, so good.
Yeah, I have to say, when I first heard the show, I was expecting Cole to be kind of a, like a typical lunkhead athlete guy, right? Like a Kurt Schilling or Joe Morgan or somebody like that. And he's actually really, I don't know, he's very non-lunky, I guess. So I think the show is like a thinking man's baseball show.
He's definitely got some of that inside him, the baseball rules of society.
Yeah, sure.
But at the same time, he's very well spoken, and now he sells real estate. So you can tell he's got some of the mental processes that maybe some of his teammates don't or didn't have. But all in all, he definitely knows the game and has been a definitely very valuable co-host to have.
Yeah, that's cool. Hey, so I know you're also a writer. I've seen your work on your website, BrandonWarren. That's .com, and that's WARNE for the listeners. And also on Rotographs, the fantasy wing of Fangraphs.com. Where else can our listeners find your work?
Oh, wow. The Sports Post, I have been writing a daily column all baseball season long on pitching. I just started looking at a place called Number Fire. That's number in lowercase capital F and then fire. That's more of a statistically inclined place for like fantasy sports too. Beyond that, I'm obviously on The Breakdown. I do some stuff for Go 96.3, and I did this baseball season cover the Twins for a website called Cold Omaha, which was with 105 The Ticket before they rebranded to a hip-hop station, and now we're with 93X and KQRS 92. So kind of a little bit all over the place. The easiest way to keep up with me is obviously on Twitter, where I can be a little easier to track down. It's sometimes hard for me to keep it all straight, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I guess that's the way the business is heading now, right, with the online content production.
Exactly.
Do you guys have any questions for Brandon before we get into the meat of the show a little bit?
Brandon, can you give me an example of, what's one of your favorite baseball stories from the last few months? Is there something that just stands out to you that maybe we might not know about, or something that you want to just rehash as one of your favorites?
In terms of an on-field narrative or something like that?
Sure.
Well, I've really been interested. I'm always interested in seeing what former Twins are doing. And with the Blue Jays being recently eliminated, it was fun to watch that team because there's just so many former Twins. Liam Hendricks, Ben Revere, and then obviously the most fun one for me is Chris Colabello because of his struggle coming up. And there's no shortage of stories of Chris Colabello's basically coming up in the independent leagues. But a funny story that Cole had told me was that Chris was basically down to his last few bucks, and he is a poker junkie, and so he had gone into a poker tournament and won a bad beat hand or some bad beat tournament, he comes out with like $50,000, which in minor league funds is an exorbitant amount of money. I mean, that's more than a minor leaguer would make in probably 2 or 3 years, and that's what bankrolled him to keep going with baseball long enough for the Twins to find him and sign and end up in their system a couple years ago. And I corroborated that story with his personal hitting coach, and it turned out that it was pretty much completely letter to letter true, which is cool.
That is a cool
It's
story.
great.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, we want to talk a little ball, but first I've got to do some house cleaning, as you know, probably from doing your own show. So first of all, I should mention you've got Twitter. We also have extensive social media where we'll post links to your site and stories and blog, of course. You can follow us on Facebook. We've got a page there. We're on Twitter at StoryNorth, and we also have a Tumblr site, storynorthpodcast.tumblr.com. Again, we'll post sort of links to everything we're going to talk about here today on the social media sites, so people can follow along or check it out before they listen or even after. So. Also, I should mention we are going to, I want to tout a reading that's happening this week. Marlon James, the Booker Mann Prize winner, will be reading at the Hopkins Center of the Arts Thursday, October 28th. That'll be the day this show comes out at 7:30 p.m. If you can't make it, he's also reading the next morning at the same place, October 30th. I believe that's at 11 a.m., so check that out. And Jeff, you've got Books and Bars coming up this week as well.
Absolutely. Wednesday, November 4th, a rare Wednesday for us, will be at the Happy Gnome. Instead of our usual first Tuesday, it's the first Wednesday, and that is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. Fun for the whole family.
Yeah, and also the week after that is at the new Minneapolis location, right?
Yes, we are sticking around at Indeed's Tap Room in Northeast Minneapolis, so we will be there on Tuesday, November 10th, and continuing in there on second Tuesdays for a while. Very exciting stuff.
Cool. All right, so let's talk a little baseball, right? Let's talk a little about the playoffs. Is anyone here happy the Cubs are at?
No, I mean, come on. They, I don't know. I'd be interested to hear what Brandon thinks about this, but I mean, I think of any team, they have a good shot of at least making another run at it next season. I mean, things change so much, but they're young, they're talented. I mean, they have money. I think we'll see the Cubs again. It's so unfortunate that of all the days that they were eliminated was the Back to the Future actual day that was predicted that they would sweep. They were swept on that day, and that they're gone.
Irony.
It's sad for me. I've no love for the Mets, but I guess I'm rooting for the Royals now.
Brandon, what's your take on that? Were you a Cubs fan or?
Well, isn't there a common thread of the name Murphy with every time the Cubs have been eliminated over the last 100 years or something like that?
Yes, that's right.
Like the goat's name or something. I don't know how that works.
The curse of the Billy Goat, right? He was named Murphy. That's right.
Daniel Murphy with the big series, and no, I'm a big Cubs fan. If I were to have a team in the National League, I really love Joe Madden. I think they might sign David Price and just go for it again next year. And it's a young, awesome team offensively with tons of talent. And if they can get probably one more starter and cobble together another pretty good bullpen, they're going to be right where they were this year.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, that narrative a lot. In fact, I've heard that the Cubs have a brighter future than the Mets, even, right? Because pitching is a lot more volatile than hitting. But talk to say the Texas Rangers, for example, who made that World Series appearance not too long ago, and everyone was talking about them being a dynasty. And just things change quickly. If you don't grab your chance, you may not see it. There's no guarantee in baseball.
Well, isn't there a stat, though, that if you, like the Royals went last year to the series and lost, that if you are returning World Series, a pennant champion, that you have a really good shot of winning? Haven't, like, teams that have gone and lost come back the following year and won? Isn't that true?
I don't know. I have to look up the numbers. Brendan?
Didn't the Rangers lose back-to-back years just recently?
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I mean, and they were within, if I'm not mistaken, a pitch or two of taking down the Cardinals, and I think David Freese hit a big home run to center field, and that was Joe Buck copying his dad Jack Buck's call with the Kirby Puckett home run.
That's right.
Got people a little upset, but honestly, yeah, it's amazing how stacked that National League is going to be, and for the Cubs to get back there, it's not going to be just a show-up thing, because the Pirates and Cardinals alone, just in that division, are really good. So it's going to be an amazing evolution of the National League over the next couple of years.
Who do you like in the series?
I like the Mets. Honestly, I think the Royals' devil magic runs out, but at the same time, that just might be because I haven't believed in the Royals this year, didn't believe in them last year either, and I think that Mets pitching staff is just unbelievable.
Yeah. Do you believe in momentum?
Nah, honestly, when you think about where momentum comes from, well, who had the momentum before it started, and where did it go when new momentum started? And I don't know. I mean, I think you're hot until you're not, and you're cold until you're not. And the big leaguers and the major leagues, the players are so good that a guy goes 0 for 10 and then he hits a home run on the 11th at bat. And it's just from a standpoint of man versus man combat, and they're both great athletes, and somebody's got to win that matchup.
Yeah. Hey, one last question before we move on to our essays and all. The Twins. Let's talk about the Twins. They had a pretty good year this year, and I know Minneapolis was kind of excited. What was their end record? They finished above 500, right?
I think they were like 83 and 79.
Yeah, which was a lot better, I would argue, than their talent, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, there's no question. For my money, it was probably still not extremely talented of a team compared to their counterparts in the American League. They benefited from a bunch of teams falling out of the race late, even though the Twins didn't really make any huge moves at the trade deadline. But you know what? They raced out to such a good start, and you can't take those wins away. So even if you only play 500 for the last 3 months like the Twins did, that's still good enough to sustain whatever start you began with. And so that, at the end of the day, it wasn't enough to get them to the postseason, and that last series of the season kind of knocked them off that pedestal. But to finish where they did was a big surprise, and I think a lot of fans are pretty excited about the future.
Is there a future? I mean, there is a future,
I think so. Granted, it's going to have to be augmented with players from the outside, whether it's bullpen help, they need a better catcher, but they do have probably the brightest or second brightest future in that division when you consider that the Royals are going to lose a few players in free agency. Cleveland is really good, but they didn't put it together this year. And, Chicago, Detroit's obviously in transition, and Chicago put a bunch of money in free agency and it didn't pan out. So the Twins are in good position moving forward, I think.
Cool. So there is hope, Twin Cities. Fear not.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, before we move on to the essay part of this and the baseball writing, just wanted to tout a couple of Live and Social podcasts. One is Joan of Art. That's a weekly podcast on the Live and Social Network that investigates and celebrates people who make art. Joan Verbruggen invites you into discussion with artists from every corner of the universe, with episodes uploaded every Monday. Check it out. That's on aliveandsocial.com. As is Alzheimer's Speaks Radio, which gives voice to those affected with memory loss and their care partners, while empowering them to live purpose-filled lives. Discussions raise awareness, give hope, and reveal real everyday stories of living with dementia. Join the conversation, learn along the way, and laugh as the podcast hosts maneuver the roller coaster called memory loss. Learn more, visit Lori's website, alzheimersspeak.com. And again, check all that out on aliveandsocial.com. Cool. So, as part of this podcast, I chose 5 random essays, a couple that were, I'd call pre or non-internet, and a couple that are definitely good examples of the kind of baseball writing we can find on the internet. So if it's cool with you guys, I'd just like to run through them and talk about it a little bit and see if we can come up with any crazy theories about texts in the internet era. So the first one was Hub Fans Bid Kidded You. That's an essay by John Updike that was published October 22nd, 1960 for The New Yorker. Kim, you're smiling. Why did I pronounce it very French-like?
No, I think you should say what it's about, but then I got all kinds of things to say about this essay.
Okay, yeah. I will say what it's about. But first, John Updike, I want to mention who Updike was. He's the National Book Award winner, novelist, short story writer, and essayist, best known for his rabbit novels written in the 60s through the 80s. And Hub Fans is about Ted Williams' last game, which took place on September 25th, 1960. For those non-baseball folks who are listening, who've made it this far, Ted Williams was the Hall of Fame left fielder for the Boston Red Sox and the last man to hit 400 in the major leagues. At the time he wrote the essay, John Updike was 28 years old, and it was his first and only essay on baseball. So yeah, what'd you guys think of it? You've read this before, I assume, Kim.
Well, it was an interesting selection. Like, it isn't just a text of the non-internet era. Like, it is so John Updike and writers of his ilk in 1960 writing for The New Yorker. I mean, it's just got like style coming out its ears. He's like citing, I have to read this. He talks about a groundskeeper early on, like a mushroom gatherer seen in a Wordsworthian perspective.
Yes.
We've got references to Greek myth. We've got David and Goliath. We've got Euclidean geometry.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just throwing everything at this baseball essay. And I have to say, it's pretty entertaining.
Yeah, what do you think, Jeff?
I would agree that it definitely feels of a time and a place. I think you had said maybe that it was one of the more widely read pieces on baseball ever. I don't know if you had a stat on that, or you had thrown it out there that this is, because I hadn't read it until you sent it. So I felt like, has everyone read this one except me and stuff? But I looked at it from the point of view of kind of this idea of knowing when you're like, you've done what you can do and you're sort of like, you've done all you can do and it's time to kind of hang it up, that sort of a thing. That's the sense that I sort of got, just this idea of like a guy who doesn't have anything else to prove, and he was as good as anyone at what he did, and kind of just in some ways a requiem, if you will. I mean, he was kind of, right? It was kind of like, this is the end for this guy, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he summed up his career and the entanglements he had with the local sports media and everything as well. Brandon, have you read this before, or was this your first time as well?
This is his first, and for me as a writer, when I read something like this, it makes me, it's basically everything I wish to be as a writer.
Yeah.
You kind of, it's when you see
Join the
something
club.
iconic in your chosen field, and you're just like, man, why can't I do something like this?
Yeah.
And all long form that is well done kind of puts me in that spot where, I can write something, medium length and kind of get all the details I want and work them in, but the long form with the attention to detail and the small little things here that are, might seem inconsequential when you see them, but you can weave it into the story, into the fiber of what you're writing, and it comes out as just a masterpiece of art. I'm still looking for that. I'm still trying to figure out a way to do that with any subject, and I think, sometimes it's something you can't see unless you step back and look at it. Whereas, with Ted Williams, I think it was pretty clear that you were going to be able to do something like that just because of the icon that he was at that time in Boston, and when you kind of got a feeling that his career was coming to an end. But again, this is the kind of thing where I look at, and I'm in awe because I hope to write something that can be even 1/10 this gripping and detailed someday.
Do you find that, do you think that baseball, maybe more than other sports, lends itself to this kind of writing and this kind of storytelling, though, in this narrative? I mean, maybe it is because it's been for so long called the national pastime, and it's maybe been around longer than some of our other sports here in America. But when I think of writing like this about another sport, there's maybe some talk of like the NFL with Lombardi in like the 60s, but to sort of give it this mythic quality and to the way it's written about, I don't often read words like this, and maybe because they're newer, about other sports.
I do think there is some excellent writing about football, but it doesn't have that mythological claim. But I think about something like Friday Night Lights, or I think about The Blind Side, and I feel like those both do really beautiful things with the game. And for me, a test of good sports writing is if I can read it, because I don't particularly care. I care a little bit about sports, like yay, but like there's only one of these games or moments that was at all significant to me, which is highlighted in these things. So, or football, I'm not particularly a fan. So, the fact that Friday Night Lights is amazing, or, that I went all the way through The Blind Side, without pausing for a moment, I think that's a testament to how good the writing is.
Well, I also think, there might be the casual fan or just, maybe even the non-fan who can maybe at least relate to or has heard the story of, the tall tale aspects of baseball with, did Babe Ruth point to where he was going to hit the ball? Did Willie Mays catch it, a backwards catch, that sort of a thing. Like, you may have heard of some of these amazing plays and how good certain players were. And it has taken on this like larger than life, almost like this tall tale aspect, especially, the older and more classic the players are in the games. It has this sort of, as it's passed down, they used to hit 400 back in the day, that kind of thing. It's unfathomable now,
I think this piece, though... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Brandon.
I think there's a parallel structure, and it's maybe not intentionally, but it's from the standpoint of time. Like, time doesn't mean anything to baseball because it's not timed, and so, like, it becomes timeless not only in its evolution but in how it can be viewed through the human scope. And so you could, if you had a mind to and you had the stylings to write a story like this about a current superstar whose career is coming to an end. Nobody comes to mind really right now, but at the same time, like if you knew there was a superstar whose career was ending and you could style it like this, like I think a truly great writer could do it. And I think that's where baseball becomes the sport that is the easiest to capture in a literary sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we should mention too, this whole piece is around the narration of Williams homering in his last at bat. So not only was it him Updike visiting an athlete in his last day, but it came with this narrative structure that was given to him by Ted Williams.
But I sort of feel like he would have done something with it anyway, because he highlights the point that like wasn't that exciting a game, and then afterwards things weren't that exciting, and like he really like plucks out the moment which he wants to build the piece around. And highlights it in that way.
And Brandon, to your point about maybe a more current superstar who is retiring, I mean, we look at maybe Derek Jeter and this other piece that you have with the move that Jeter makes, the flip move. And we have this whole very poetic piece, if we want to segue to that one now, which basically is all on if only, if Jeter didn't make that amazing play, if only this player would have slid, everything would have been different. But there was no slide, and Jeter did make this play.
So Jeff is talking about the next piece I picked was George Vesey's column in the New York Times, published October 25th, 2001, called Slide, Jeremy, Slide. That's about a specific play, the flip play, right? That's in the October 13th game in the 2001 AL Division Series between the New York Yankees and the Oakland Athletics. So we probably have to set up the play a little bit for the listeners. There was a runner in first, Jeremy Giambi for the Oakland A's, and I think it was Terrence Long, who had a double.
Yes, that was him.
Yeah, down the right field line, and Jeremy Giambi came all the way around third and came home, and the cutoff, the throw went awry, and Jeter came out of nowhere, scooped it up, and flipped it backhanded to the catcher, Jorge Posada, who tagged Jeremy out, who was standing stiff and dope-like as he crossed the plate. The Yankees went on to win the game 1-0, and the series 3-2. And also in the context of this game took place just weeks after 9/11. Right.
And this is the one time in my life that I was rooting for the Yankees. And I was very disappointed that they actually lost to Arizona Diamondbacks in that World Series, because I have been a lifelong, growing up in the Midwest, Yankee hater. And to actually, because of 9/11 and just the country in general, I felt this is a positive thing. This couldn't write a better story, a better baseball narrative than if the New York Yankees win the World Series after this.
I'm going to disagree here. This one. I'm going to I think the country was rooting for a dramatic Yankees loss, because we all hate the Yankees, and we kind of banded together in our universal hatred, and they gave us the ultimate game, the ultimate series, in losing in Game 7 of the World Series to an upstart Western team. It was awesome.
But wait, let's go back to this moment.
Sorry, Brandon.
This is the only moment that I have connection to, because I actually do like the A's, and I rooted for them growing up, but I don't really follow them now. And I remember listening to this game on the radio. I was driving back from backpacking in Yosemite, and so I really have this moment like crystal in my head. And why don't you just give like a sentence or two of what the piece is like?
Yeah, sure.
It's a crazy piece.
My favorite line in this. Well, first of all, I should say that it's almost in a form of a poem, a reverse guzzle. Now, a guzzle is a kind of poem that repeats the same words over and over in each line. But in this case, he starts each line with the same words: "Slide, Jeremy, slide." So this is my favorite line from the prose piece. Slide, Jeremy, slide. Ramon Hernandez is flapping both arms in the universal semaphore for slide. Perhaps he is too far back to influence your decision. As Willie Randolph, the wise Yankee third base coach, will observe about Hernandez a week later, maybe he was in the vicinity, but was he really there? So each line starts with "Slide, Jeremy, slide," and goes through the narrative of this play, and also connects that play to bigger issues in baseball: the upstart A's, the changing of the guard, the stalwart old Yankees, the civic engagement, and all that stuff. What did you think, Brandon, of this piece? Do you remember? Did you ever read this when it came out?
Well, so this is, I believe, an offshoot of Slide Kelly Slide,
Oh, is it? Okay.
which was published in basically the late 19th century for a player in the Hall of Fame named King Kelly, one of the most well-known, notorious players of that era, very well known for bending the rules. A couple of the stories in his lore include cutting from first to third without touching second, and being on the bench and there's a foul pop by the dugout, and he called out as though he was announcing from the stands, Kelly now catching for whoever, and then recording the put out. So there's some pretty great stories, kind of tall tales about him in great baseball lore. And if you don't mind, I can read it. It's only about 8 lines.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
It goes, Slide Kelly Slide, your running's a disgrace. Slide Kelly Slide, stay there, hold your base. If someone doesn't steal you and your batting doesn't fail you, they'll take you to Australia. Slide Kelly Slide.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I had no idea that existed.
So,
That's great.
Yeah, so I believe that's what Vetzi is leaning on. Back in 2001, I would have been a sophomore in high school when that came out, and my baseball writing really started coming around about 2004. Mm-hmm. But reading this brings back the innocence of my baseball fandom, in that I hadn't started thinking about teams in an analytical sense yet, and so I appreciated the game for the beauty in front of me as a young mind. And so reading these, this was great, because I remember that play and thinking, one, I didn't think Jeremy was out. I still to this day don't know if he was out. But at the same time, the styling is so cool, the parallel structure and how he's taken something that at that time was 115 or 110 years old and adapted it. You don't see that too often anymore, and it's pretty iconic.
That's pretty cool, and it's that's great. I didn't even know that. So he's tying this piece to like higher ideas in baseball. He's actually attaching it physically to a 100-year previous piece.
So I want to throw in one more possible reference.
Sure.
You've got your guzzle, and then there's this 19th century reference. It sounded a little bit to me like Allen Ginsberg. Like, it seemed very like Beat Generation to me, with like the repetition, but then the different lengths of descriptive clauses, and then just the very end where he's like, "Get down, man."
Right.
It seemed very groovy. So I don't know. I kept hearing that Allen Ginsberg in there as I was reading it.
I could see that actually. Not knowing the older reference from many years prior, when I first read it too, I thought it was sort of like a beat poetry. I definitely could see that. And I rewatched that play a bunch of times in prep for this.
We'll have
and
the
at
YouTube video
first,
for everyone.
we'll put up that YouTube video, because the first couple times I was like, he might be safe. And then the more I watched, I was like, no, you know what? If you look, I do think he's out. And then this goes to something that I think is part of the bigger narrative of baseball, because I disagree with you that the country wanted to see the Yankees lose. I think it was, I know, I don't think anyone hated the Yankees as much as I did growing up. So I wanted them to win for once, and I think also, though, it's a game of especially back then without replays and everything, it's a game of humans making decisions, and maybe in that umpire's story, it's a better story if that guy's out too. You know what I mean? And in the split-second decision he has to make, he's calling that guy out.
But he does almost seem like, you can see why he's urging Jeremy Slide, because it does seem like a lack of will.
Well,
right?
That's the thing.
It's like, make it to the base.
Well,
Slide
he just can't
faster.
even believe.
That's what I was
He
going.
can't even believe that. He slides, he's safe, right?
Yes.
Pretty consistent with Giambi as a player, though. In fact, the other cool thing is that this is a year before Moneyball, because Giambi was traded during the Moneyball season, the great book by Michael Lewis that became a major motion picture. And so there's a lot of fun tie-ins to this, because Moneyball, too, is a great read.
Yeah, absolutely.
Spurred an entire generation of how we think about baseball today.
And absolutely, and I'm glad you bring that up, because you are like the segue master here. Because when I think of
like
the Nate Silver piece that we had for today's show, just totally brought to mind Moneyball and the A's again, and almost in a way that, I mean, my first reaction to it is, baseball's always been a game of such numbers and such stats and the way people keep them and the pride in that. But at a certain point, I'm wondering if it's sucking the fun out of it. I read Nate's piece, and I enjoy a lot of Nate Silver's writing. But when I read that, I was like, there's not, you know what I mean? This is not baseball, the story that I want to know about baseball. Yeah. This is like crunching numbers and making money.
Let me give the summary of it real quick. This is a piece by Nate Silver called "The Science of Forecasting," and it appeared on BaseballProspectus.com in March 11, 2004. In it, along with a bunch of graphs, Nate Silver, who is a statistician, explained the challenges of building a model for forecasting baseball performance based on aggregate data. And then applying it to individuals. See, Jeff is falling asleep. So basically what he does is he takes he crunches the numbers from across, thousands of player careers, figures out a general arc of a typical career, but he sort of pointed out that you can't predict any one particular person's career based on that sort of overarching data. But it's very numbers driven, right? Like Jeff was saying, it's very number crunchy. But I would say, along with Moneyball, that's kind of a way that the writing for baseball has gone since the advent of the internet. And I know Brandon, who writes for Fangraphs and did write for Baseball Prospectus, and I myself really love the stats part. It probably falls in the stats camp. Am I right there, Brandon?
Yeah, that's right.
So talk about this. Is this sucking the fun out of baseball? Softball question.
Well, I mean, I can see both arguments, honestly, because there are some people who want it to be a getaway to unplug the brain and just enjoy the game and not have it be work. But at the same time, there is a groundswell of people, and it continues to be a bigger bunch as time soldiers on, that just want to understand the game in a different way. And, to understand why when a player breaks out at age 30, people aren't as encouraged as if a guy breaks out at 24 or 22. And it's funny to think that just 10 years ago, we weren't exactly sure what that meant, and we get more and more sure as time goes on. But just like anything in life, when you think you're getting closer to the answer, what you might actually be doing is just pushing the questions along too. I think that's kind of where we're at from a player analytics standpoint. Is we might know a whole lot more from an aging curve standpoint. And this is basically aging curves for the average player.
Yeah.
But now it just opens up new avenues for us to explore. And for fans that don't want to go down that road, I think they do kind of feel like, not only can I not keep up, but I just don't want to keep up. Why am I feeling forced down this road? And so, the subscription model for some of these websites can kind of keep people that don't want to be near that away. But at the same time, too, you do run the risk of losing some of your target market. And baseball doesn't want to do that. They're not quite like the NFL where they're printing money. And, baseball is not hurting. Obviously, player salaries have crept up dramatically since the days of Kirby Puckett and Kent Hrbek. But at the same time, they've got to find a way to engage the younger generation, and I'm not sure that math is the way to do it.
Yeah. I feel like what's at stake here with this piece is it pits, science or sort of an analytic model, as you mentioned, against narrative, against storytelling, right? Because one of the dangers of storytelling, we talked a little bit about this last week with our science podcast, is that you may create an idea of reality that's not quite real, right? I feel like stats do two things. One is they discern luck from true talent, and they forecast the future, right? The second one is a tool that used to belong only to GMs, right? That they were interested in. Like, none of us fans in 1960 really cared, how our team was going to do in 1961. Right, that was something that GMs were interested in. But I think since the advent of fantasy baseball, people have gotten a lot more interested in predicting, the talent of, understanding the true talent of a baseball player and figuring out will they'll be in a year from now. And I think the internet has a lot to do with that and sort of the existence of this kind of thinking about baseball. But maybe I'm a geek, but I think it's really fascinating, some of the questions that arise out of these number crunching stats and the Moneyball way doing things. I love seeing people invent new systems that are really smart, right? And whether it's baseball or politics or public policy making, I think it's cool.
But I think that really highlights the effect of the writing. Like, I read Moneyball. I loved Moneyball.
Right.
I could not make it 2 paragraphs into the Nate Silver piece, and he's not writing for me. There's no like effort of craft in there. He's just like, here I'm making my case with numbers. Here are the numbers. So I would have been self-selected out long before that he got there.
I think the danger of such writing, though, would be if you go to a level where you scoop up more people, you aren't staying true to what you're trying to provide. And that is a very exclusive way of writing, but I think that's his goal too. Not to say that the people shouldn't feel welcome to reading it, but if he's out to do a certain thing, and I think he just is kind of understanding, hey, this isn't going to be for some people. But I realize that sounds awful for me to kind of go down that road, but
no, I think it's highly accurate.
I think that might be what his point of view is, because it's dry. There's no question it's dry, and you could strip that of baseball, and it could be politics, it could be religion, and if it's not down your avenue, it's just not up your alley.
Yeah, but I think that's interesting because that's kind of what the internet has given us, really specialized knowledge as well. And this is why I picked it. I didn't, honestly, I didn't think Kim or Jeff would make it through this thing, and I picked that on purpose. No, I seriously. I mean, you understand the issue after reading the first paragraph. Like, if you just wanted to know what he's talking about, you would just read the first paragraph, and you could skip all the data explanation in the middle, and understand what he's saying.
I feel like Jay is testing us, don't you, Kim? That these assignments are like, I bet they won't make it all the way through it.
And it was really long. Did I highlight that? It was really long.
All right, so and I should mention too. I want to talk a little bit about Nate Silver. He went on to do modeling for presidential elections based on polls, and started a blog called 538, which was not bought up by the New York Times, but I guess he agreed to wrote for the New York Times for a while. He predicted 49 of 50 states in the 2008 election, and all 50 states in the 2012 election, and stepped on a lot of people's toes. Commentators on cable news network who make their living, talking about horse races. And here's this guy coming with numbers and ruining all their narratives, which is what he did in baseball as well. And now he's working for ESPN. He moved his blog to ESPN. Another piece I want to talk about was the Fire Joe Morgan piece, the expository writing, which was the piece called Expository Writing, which was filed September 16, 2009 to Deadspin. The writer of this is Ken Tremendous, right, which is the nom de plume of TV writer and producer Michael Schur, who co-created Parks and Recreation. So this one was criticizing a piece in MLB.com written by Hal Bodley, arguing that Derek Jeter deserved the 2009 AL MVP award, which, in the big scope of things is not that important of an argument. But what he did is he took down this guy's argument sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph. This is a technique known as fisking. It's kind of an internet technique that people do, especially with journalism, right? Well, they'll deconstruct arguments as it goes along in a bloggy sort of way. So talk to me about this piece. What did you guys think of this?
I have to say, everything was hard after we started out with the Updike. I mean, I'm serious. It was so carefully crafted. And then, if you want to talk today about the shift from print to internet using these pieces as an example, the internet loses. This was just, I got it after a while. It was funny and it was snarky, but it wasn't beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I like his work in television and other things. I mean, I'm so, as much as I appreciate the flip play that Jeter made, I do not like Derek Jeter or care about the Yankees. So I was I also hadn't seen the original piece. It reminded me a bit of reading the comment section of a piece, because it was just a line for line sort of snarky takedown, in the sense of, and I wasn't invested in the in the topic as much. So
yeah. Brandon, what was your take?
For me, the biggest thing about snark and sports writing is it has to be thorough, it has to be intelligent, and it has to be true to the subject matter. That's what I appreciate from Ken Tremendous, Michael Schur, Mose Schrute. If you watch The Office, he was cousin Mose of Dwight Schrute. The big thing that I appreciated about this was it was intelligent. It didn't take shortcuts. I don't think you can take shortcuts by writing that many words, to be honest with you. But when you are going to deconstruct, or I think in this case, just try to destroy someone's point, if you do it in a manner where you're going to be snarky and you're going to kind of be snippy about it, you have to be intelligent enough to foster a counter argument that stands up. And there were times where it felt like he went over the line, and I think sometimes that is what gets the clicks and is a little more sensationalized in today's society for writing and all that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he wasn't lazy. It wasn't bad analysis. If you can have good analysis with a little bit of attitude, and bam, that's baseball perspective in a nutshell.
Right.
At its best. And that's what I got from this piece. Fire Joe Morgan, obviously that type of thing has been very popular on the internet for a very long time. I think it's kind of gone away now, but that's what people talk about, was the Fire Joe Morgan days. That's kind of on
the
baseball Twitter, the days of yore. People yearn for that.
What was your favorite insult?
Around.
What was your favorite insult in that piece?
Oh, off the top of my head, I don't know. It was in Deadspin, right? I mean, because
this was on Deadspin, but they had they hosted it for a little while.
Okay.
They would allow guest posts back.
Because Deadspin is one of the few places. I mean, I'll read sports writing on like Deadspin or Grantland. I mean, that's pretty much.
Well, why?
Why?
Yeah.
Because I think it speaks to me. Like that's sort of the level of it's entertaining enough, with knowledge, but I don't feel like I have to know too much.
Brandon's trying to bump it.
Go ahead.
What's on your mind?
I don't like insulting people from a personal standpoint, but my favorite insult was, there may be more delicious foods than water chestnuts, but water chestnuts are the most delicious food. And it was just like the attack on the logic being used in the piece.
Yes,
it was simple, but it was thorough, and you got the point. Right. You don't have to say you're a big dummy, but you can say, look, you wrote something really stupid, and this is what I think.
It reminds me of Flame Wars on the early days of those discussion forums. And I used to write a lot for politics online, and this reminded me very much of staking out territory and defending it with wit and acerbic, Oscar Wildean barbs, that kind of thing. So it's highly entertaining. What struck me about this piece, it feels really dated right now. Like, I don't care about the AL MVP in 2009 anymore, but I certainly I remember caring about the Mike Trout versus Miguel Cabrera debate. In fact, I think I wrote a column about it. But yeah, so it feels really dated. Like, the shelf life on this seems, Brandon, you're absolutely right. This is like a groundbreaking website that got a ton of clicks and influenced the way a lot of people talk about sports ever since.
Fire Joe Morgan was?
Fire Joe Morgan, yeah. And just sort of
often imitated, never duplicated, though. Just to that level, you don't see it.
Nope, not anymore.
So, Brandon, is that something that you aspire to bring back in a way with what you're writing?
If I had that kind of wit, I don't think I do, to be honest. I mean, for me, what I've learned as an adult as I approach 30 is that the things I enjoy, I can't really replicate, whether it's, really intense music with really good lyrics and really good beats, or whether it's a really good piece or a really good TV show with really intelligent writing. Like, I then aspire to be that brilliant, but at the same time, it's like, maybe I just need to understand these things and realize that I can't recreate them. So I think I'm still just a consumer at this point. I granted, I write a lot, but I don't know if I can get to that level. I would like to. I absolutely would like to. But at the same time, understanding my limitations from an intelligence standpoint has been big for me.
Who should we be reading right now that we might not be on sports
right
writing?
now?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're not reading Joe Posnanski, you're missing out. I think he's kind of the one of the guys that's timeless. People have kind of backed off of him because I think he was pretty fervent in his defense of Joe Paterno. Which,
that's right. He was writing a biography of him when that came down.
Yeah, that's a really hot button issue, understandably so, because there was very, very bad situation there. But his writing in a vacuum is very good.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I mean, I'm trying to think of who else I read.
I'm gonna double down on Posnanski. I think what Posnanski brings, he used to write for the Kansas City Star, so he has sort of the gravitas of an old school reporter, but he also acknowledges sort of the new trends and ways of writing columns. He did he started a top 100 baseball players of all time. He's great on telling bios, but he's really good at lauding people, like talking them up and finding these almost treacly messages out of it, but it strikes a chord in like baseball fandom. But with Paterno, right, here's a guy who needed an investigative reporter to go into that story, and we got Posnanski, who was essentially hired to write this glowing biography of the guy. So, were you going to say something?
My list, if I'm being loyal to my Fangraphs guys, Jeff Sullivan is a must read. Honestly, he's very distinct. He writes with way more words than he needs from a stylistic standpoint, but it's kind of endearing. Eno Saris does a great job. Carson Sestouli is a poet besides, so his writing has kind of a fun tinge to it. But also David Larilla he's got a pretty fun style too. And then the other person was Gabe Kapler, who was doing some media stuff for Fox Sports 1. He was doing TV, he was writing. He has a lifestyle blog called Cap Lifestyle. And so basically he's a player that was super fit and really into lifestyle stuff. He's now like one of the favorites for the Dodgers managerial job, actually, because he was their farm director this year. But taking him out of the public sector has been really disappointing because he had a lot of insights from a lot of different places. His lifestyle blog, though, is probably the number one thing I would recommend to read from a baseball-related standpoint.
Cool. Well, thanks for the recommendation.
We got a lot of stuff to post.
Yeah,
we have a lot of links to post.
Stuff.
This is great. Thanks.
I just wanted to throw in one more thought since we're talking about sort of the way that internet has changed this kind of writing. Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking about like the backlash that a lot of female sports writers have faced, kind of daring to tell these stories on the internet. I don't know if you guys have been following this story, but there's just a huge amount of harassment of women writing online about sports, and sort of like, how dare you tell this story kind of vein. And I just think that's sort of an interesting offshoot of the internet, as a forum for this kind of writing.
Yeah, in fact, a friend of mine, Amy Bass, who she's a professor. Do you remember Stony Brook College? I think of history, or anyways, I found the details and posted. But she worked at the Olympics. But I remember she posted an article about soccer, about women's soccer, sort of praising it, and the comment section was deplorable, like the kind of things they would say about her as a woman, like you're not allowed to write these things because...
I don't think it was about women's soccer. I think it was about the men's World Cup.
Yeah.
And that was even more like, how dare
you
you have an opinion about this?
Yes.
Yeah, but it's definitely her, but it's also kind of across the spectrum of women writing about sports.
I'll find that Amy Bass article and post that as well. But Kim's spot on with that. Cool.
The other thing I saw was Julie DeCaro writing about the Patrick Kane situation with the Blackhawks, and people on Twitter were insisting she take a puck to the head and a lot of threats that it's just like the scourge of society has been emboldened by this quasi-anonymity on Twitter, whereas you're really not as anonymous as you think. And, it's just like, who are these people? And the same thing for the Lynx WNBA championship. Like the Sports Center Twitter account posted something, and like the first 5 posts were about the looks of the women or how it wasn't a sport. And it's just like, why does this need to be said? Like, if it's not something you enjoy, fine. That's, enjoy what you like, don't enjoy what you don't. But at the same time, have some sense and have some class and treat people like human beings.
That's an excellent philosophy. Should we end
Kim,
there?
Kim, you should write more about sports.
Maybe I will learn some about sports and then write some about sports.
I really do. I like your Oakland A's jersey that you have on.
Thank you.
Yeah, right on. Hey, well, thanks for coming to join us, Brandon. That was a lot of fun. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate it.